Hey there, it's me, Nate, and today I want to give you guys my review of Eragon by Christopher Paolini. Now, Eragon is, in the entire inheritance cycle, the four main books, Eragon, Eldest, Brissinger, and Inheritance, are important books to me because the Inheritance cycle, along with the Harry Potter series, is kind of what really got me interested in fantasy as a kid. In elementary school, I basically grew up reading things like, the Hardy Boys and Goosebumps and stuff like that. And then when I got around to like 5th or 6th grade, I basically read like all of Harry Potter. And then after Harry Potter, I was looking for something else. Or at least I read all of Harry Potter that was out at the time. Deathly Hallows may not have been out yet. And then there was this book with this blue book with this dragon on the cover. And it was called Eragon. And so I picked it up and I read it and I loved it. And it was interesting because it was more of a classic fantasy feel compared to something like Harry Potter, which is, not the first academia fantasy story, but kind of really, made it a thing. I know Earthsea, a lot of people say Earthsea is like the start of academia fantasy. But, I think Harry Potter really elevated that subgenre. But regardless, anyway, so after Harry Potter, I really fell into Eragon, and I was basically reading the books as they were coming out. I remember going to the midnight release for Brissinger, when I think I was like 11 or so, and how cool that was. Because I'd never been to like a midnight release for anything before, at that time, as young as I was. So I have a lot of nostalgia for the Inheritance cycle and all of these books. And I think that's why this revisit was a bit challenging, because I haven't read any of the books in this series since I was like in junior high and high school. Because I think Inheritance came out when I was like 15 or something like that. I don't know, I think I was in high school when Inheritance book 4 came out. And so I definitely haven't read Eragon here, book 1, since then. So it's been like 15 plus-ish years since I've read the series, starting from the beginning. And so going back and rereading this book was interesting. And I actually finished this a couple of days ago, and I'm kind of having a hard time kind of saying exactly what I want to say, because I'll be honest, my experience reading this was a real mixed bag. I guess I'll go ahead and talk about my negative kind of thoughts about Eragon. And to be fair, one thing I will say real quick. Christopher Paolini, he wrote Eragon, I think when he was like 15 or 17 years old. And for a debut author, who's a teenager, I think Eragon is a great work, considering the circumstances. But as an adult, I think Eragon is a bad book. I think it's a bad book, but I do think Eragon, the book has redeeming qualities. And we'll get to those in a moment. Sorry I'm taking these pauses. I'm really trying to measure what I'm trying to say here. So, you know what? Let me rewind it back. I just assume that if you're watching, this review, you've already seen it, which you probably, that you've already read the book, which you probably have. Otherwise, I don't know why you'd be watching this. But I should, just for best practice, I should go ahead and give you a kind of like brief summary of what Eragon is about. Eragon is a classic fantasy style story, classic Dragon Rider fantasy style story, and mixed with like your kind of like a coming of age, boy in a small village fantasy goes on a quest story. Our main character, Eragon, one day is like hunting in the woods when all of a sudden there's like this kind of like magical flash and like, smoke and fire. And then once that fades away, he finds like this stone in the woods in this clearing. So curious as to what it is, he inspects it and doesn't know what it is and decides to take it with him back home. And then, after some days, one night, the stone cracks, and it turns out that the stone is not a stone. It's an egg. It's a dragon egg, and which is amazing because dragons are thought to have gone extinct in the continent of Algasia, where the story takes place. After all of the dragons and the dragon riders were killed, like decades or centuries ago, previously. And so Eragon, he takes this dragon and decides to keep it and raise it after it becomes bound to him when he touches it. And because of his decision, there's political ramifications in terms of like the king becoming interested in him, how it affects his family and his village, and just the continent as a whole. And the king is the main villain of the story. He is your, Dark Lord equivalent, or like your emperor, because he, after slaying all of the dragon riders, he took over most of the continent of Algasia and made himself emperor. And speaking of emperor, we come to like one of the faults of Eragon. This is the fault that is pretty widely shared, and why a lot of people really look down on the book is because Christopher Paolini, in writing Eragon and in writing other books in the series, took a lot of ideas and tropes quite heavily from other books and movies. Basically, and I think it's fair. It's a fair criticism. Eragon is basically Star Wars but fantasy. Eragon is your Luke. Brahm, who is a mentor type character and storyteller in the village, he is basically Obi-Wan. Murtaugh is like your cool Han Solo, a little bit older than the main character, etc., etc. So, there's that. It takes tropes from things like Lord of the Rings, etc. So, Eragon definitely does borrow and take in pretty liberally from other series, and a lot of people find faults with that. Give me one sec, I need some water. Sorry about that. And it takes a lot of ideas from other stories, which is not necessarily in itself a bad thing. It just, the way it does that, it feels very uninspired, which, again, Christopher Paolini was quite young when he wrote Eragon. So that's like one of the things, it's like, I understand it, I totally agree with that criticism, I'm willing to look past it. My faults that I found while reading this book for the first time in a long time, this is very much a travel fantasy, and by that I mean the majority of this book, at least this first book of the series, is spent going from place to place very slowly. It's like in each chapter, it's like we went, we rode our horses a little bit further today. We camped, we trained, etc., etc., etc. I don't know why I'm saying etc. over and over and over again. I mean, and that's a lot of this book. That's probably like 70% of this book. And then there are some events in between. And like the last 100 pages of this book is like actual kind of like forward plot progression that isn't really in the rest of the book. So I guess it's like a pacing issue overall. The book starts out, you're introduced to Eragon, you're introduced to the village and like his family and the characters. He meets, he finds his dragon egg. It hatches. By the way, the dragon is Saphira, and she is like our, other main character. And Eragon and Saphira, as like rider and dragon, they share like this like mental bond, so they can talk to each other like telepathically. And other people, you know, can talk, like if they've like learned how to, can talk to, can communicate telepathically as well. But Eragon and Saphira have like basically a constant kind of like mental and like emotional connection. They can feel what the other person the other, you know, half of them feels. So they're quite deeply connected. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was really, like, in terms of like the dragon rider bond, I thought that was a really good way to handle it. Instead of like just having like a dragon that's like constantly talking out loud and like, you know, in human speech, they communicate mind to mind, or like emotion to emotion. I thought it was an interesting and like actually pretty well done take on like the human dragon, you know, human dragon bond. But yeah, back to what I was saying about the pacing. This book is mainly just like Eragon and Bram and Murtagh going from place to place with an event of actual importance happening once in a while. I think maybe Paolini's idea was that like by having so much of this book being traveling, he can show a kind of like a wide swath of locations in this book, and kind of give you a lot of world building done in this book. But it's so poorly done and kind of ham-fisted that it comes off, it's very boring and dry and slow paced. There are definitely times where if this was like a book with more difficult prose, I probably would have started skimming or trying to speed read to get through it faster. But as it is like a book age, you know, aimed for younger readers, probably like more like, you know, teenage or like, you know, junior high age kids, it's not that hard to get through, so I can just get through it pretty quick, because I finished this book probably like 2-3 days, so it's not at all a hard read. And the characters, so let me okay, Eragon is, at the beginning of the book he's only 15, by the end he's 16. And Eragon is your typical kind of like, in classic fantasy stories, the naive, reckless, like kind of like lost in like purpose, protagonist character. And then other than that, like he has no, I'll be honest, he's a boring character. Like on this, I was completely uninterested in Eragon's story. I didn't care about him as a character. Like stuff happened around Eragon. There's more interesting characters around Eragon, but I never really cared about him specifically. His bond with Saphira and like their interactions and like how that all worked, that part was cool and I enjoyed that. But Eragon himself as a character I found super boring. Murtagh is a way more interesting character. And I know there is the Murtagh book, but after I finished Eragon, I tried Eldest, because I thought, from my memory, I thought Eldest like gets like way better than Eragon. I read like a chunk of Eldest, and I'm like, no, I think this is bad too. So I'm not planning to continue with the series, not even to Murtagh. Man, I'm sorry, I'm just like all over. But this is such a nostalgic series for me, and then coming back to it and just like really acknowledging like, there's some cool things. No, there's not. I'm being honest. Basically, other than Eragon's bond with Saphira, the book is bad. Like it's all just a lot of like really, it's very tropish, very kind of bland fantasy with lousy world building, and uninspired, uninteresting characters. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it there, because I feel like I'm just gonna kind of meander around in my thoughts if I keep on going with this. But it is disappointing coming back to the series that I grew up loving, and then just really having not enjoyed the experience, which it happens to all of us, because like, we grew up with something, we're nostalgic for it, and then years later we go back to it and revisit it, and it doesn't hold up for us the same way we thought it would. you know, I feel like all of us have that, you know, that show, that movie, a game or book series that, you know, like we loved and we come back to it and it's like, you know, and I know some people say the phrase, oh, I grew out of that thing, as almost to like disparage that thing that they were fond of. I wouldn't say that like I grew out of Eragon. I'm technically, I guess I did. I just don't like that phrase. I think Eragon is still, depending on your age and where you're coming from, you know, into reading it, is actually still good. Because I think Eragon is still a great book for younger readers who may not be experienced in fantasy, or, you know, somebody who has not read any fantasy, or, you know, doesn't even like fantasy. They can come into Eragon, and it's like, it's not super complex or anything. It's very approachable. It's very easy to get into. I think it's still probably a good introduction to fantasy. And it's like, hey, if you like Eragon, there are other Dragon Rider series. I hear, what is it called? Songs of Chaos, Seeds of Chaos. I know that's like a new kind of like more modern Dragon Rider series going on. You know, there are, you know, or if you just want more of like the classic kind of fantasy feel, people, you know, could say, oh, you should try out Lord of the Rings, or you can try out like Shannara or something like that. So I think Eragon is actually a good book to help people get into fantasy if you're younger, or just like, you know, in general. And it can kind of help you, like, you know, try to find like the through line of fantasy that you might like. But as for me, I think Eragon is a bad book. I'm gonna give it a 2 stars out of 5 on my review scale. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. If you've read Eragon, or if you have thoughts about the series overall, let me know. Comment down below. And if you could, like the video and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, have a good day.